Now, US-led bombing in Syria has taken a staggering toll of civilian lives, say the UN war crimes investigators now. Nearly 100% of airstrikes in Syria are carried out by the US, but it refuses to take responsibility for the civilian casualties. Here's a report.
The US-led air war over Syria appears to have hit an air pocket. Australia has temporarily withdrawn from further strikes after Russia warned on Monday that it would track as targets any US or coalition aircraft flying over the battle zone. This, of course, flows from the downing of a Syrian Sukhoi fighter on Sunday by the US Air Force. Australia's decision reflecting fears over getting caught in a Russian-American confrontation. Australia may well return once it deems the skies have cleared, but for now, the US-led coalition has 6 less fighters in the Syrian airspace. But America's air war is in trouble. The UN war crimes investigators say a staggering number of civilians are dying in Syria as a result of US airstrikes. They said 200 civilians were killed in one village, Al-Mansoura, in Raqqa province. 100 others were killed elsewhere as the Raqqa battle intensified. The US is responsible for 98% of airstrikes in Syria, but does not accept responsibility for casualties, blaming it on the entire coalition. US media reports say the higher casualties is because fighting has spread to urban areas, with Islamic State militants hiding among civilians. But until last week, the US had only 2 investigators probing civilian casualties. Also, there is no independent assessment of the quality of intelligence being used to determine targets. Bureau Report, WION.
And Dr. WION, the writer and political analyst, also a South Asia expert, joins me live here on the show. Thanks so much, Dr. WION, for being with us. Do you think that symbolically Australia taking the stance, which is a key partner in US-led coalitions operating in Australia, symbolically it's very significant because, somewhere Australia now feels threatened being a part of this whole coalition, taking part in what's happening in Syria from the US's side?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think most of the American allies in the region, the NATO's and the Australian, are very much worried about the American intention in the war over Syria, because the war over Syria is fought by proxies, but now the American are invoking the Russian as well for any kind of more escalation that can lead to a catastrophe over Syria. So therefore, there is a scaling of tension in the region by the American, who are illegally occupying part of Syria, illegally having military bases, unilaterally acting, and it is still the American exceptionalism policy that they have been following for a regime change in Syria.
Also, Dr. WION, 98% of the strikes, data says, are carried out by the US, its coalition forces, but yet the US refuses to take responsibility, accountability for these airstrikes. Innocent civilians are being killed. In such a scenario, what can be done? All peace efforts, they seem to have failed. Right now also, tensions are simmering.
Absolutely right. There is no collateral damage. The US call it as a collateral damage, whatever they have been doing in Afghanistan, in Pakistan province, North province, and also in Yemen, and also in Libya and Iraq, name it, and they are there. They never take responsibility for the mess. See, drone culture, always everybody knows there will be the collateral damage, and there will be more of a civilian death, because unless and until you have people on the ground who can guide you where the military target you should, there will be more of a civilian killing. So I think the American has to take responsibility and has to address this a human right violation, and not only in Syria but all over, because such kind of action, it's an act of an aggression, and that also will help whoever is on the ground to rally behind the opposites to the American policy in the region and support them. So I think the United States must be taking the moral responsibility, if not the actual responsibility for what's happening there.
All right, Dr. WION, just be with us. Let's just take a look at some of the numbers that we have with us. Look at the number of various troops that the US-led coalition have who are fighting in Syria. Well, the United States, it has 1,000 soldiers on the ground in Syria, including 500 US Special Operation Forces, about 250 Rangers and 200 Marines. And the US may deploy 1,000 more troops in the coming weeks. Now the United Kingdom. Around 200 special forces are deployed in Syria and Iraq. When it comes to Australia, they have about 780 military personnel in Iraq and Syria. Of course, the airstrikes, Australia has said that they will not be part of any air missions. Now, Germany has no troops in Syria or Iraq, but has 500 troops that are stationed in Incirlik, NATO base in Turkey, and they undertake reconnaissance flights over Syria and Iraq from time to time. France, it has no clear number, but what we do know, they say we have dozens of special forces personnel deployed in Syria. Now, let's take a look at the air strength. The United States, it has 150 plus fighter aircrafts. France has 38 aircraft of all kinds. Australia, 6. They are mostly F-15 jets. And UK's Royal Air Force has some 26. That's the air strength. Now, Germany, Italy, Poland, they carry out reconnaissance missions only. Dr. Weiler, let's go back to what Australia has said now as far as its role in Syria is concerned. In September last year, Australia was the one that said that we would widen the scope of targets in air war against the ISIL by allowing pilots to strike support and logistics resources in Iraq and Syria. Clearly, things are not going the way that it may have been planned out. Explain to us, according to you, what happened.
Look, there are objectives for the United States in Syria and Iraq. And the objective is mainly disintegration of Syria and Iraq. And that's already on the card. In fact, the coalitions are wanted to fight publicly as fighting terrorism and fighting IS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. But the fact of the matter, when you have a Syrian jet leaving the airspace in 15 minutes, you shoot it down, that means you have already the intention of not letting the Syrian attack Daesh and attack all these terrorist organizations, because it was over Idlib, it was the south of Raqqa, and then you have seen also at the border between Syria and Iraq, where the Iraqi and the Syrian army met yesterday for the first time in years. So if the United States seriously is fighting terrorism, they should have support the Syrian government. They should support the Russian, because these are the forces, and the Iraqi government fighting terrorism, because Daesh will finish from Syria and Iraq by the end of this year. It is a big surprise for the United States, for its allies, that Syrian government is yet able to sustain and survive that 7 years onslaught and able to fight again and gain the territory back from this terrorist organization. So they have killed al-Baghdadi, allegedly. Right. They have killed 2 leaders of Al-Qaeda yesterday. The Iranian missile attack also killed more than 50 of IS. Then who is fighting IS? Is the United States is supporting IS. In fact, when they are shooting down the Syrian aeroplane and a drone today, also they shot it down in southern of Syria.
That's right.
Where they have their troops in Jordan trying to sneak into Syria with 4,000 terrorists. So what do you call this? I mean, are they seriously fighting terrorism in Syria? I don't think so.
But this is a serious incident. The downing of the Syrian plane, this is unprecedented. That has taken the crisis to the next level. But Dr. Awad, do you not think that now what Australia has done, this also comes as a serious blow for the United States, putting it in a very difficult spot at this point, at a critical time, at a time when the battle to liberate the Islamic State stronghold of Raqqa, it still continues?
I think there is public anger among the public opinion in Europe and in Australia against the aggression, against the intervention in the Syrian war. I mean, a forced regime change by military means is already illegal. Even Robert Ford, the American former ambassador, he was saying that we have given more assurances to the opposition. We are fooling the Kurds in Syria and Iraq. And the government, what they are doing is a lunatic politics, and it's also insane that the Kurd is supporting the American policy. If these are the messages coming from United States, John Kerry himself, he said these words also. And then you're having Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, publicly saying that he and the Saudi Arabia have been supporting terrorist organizations inside Syria.
My last question to you, Dr. Weiler.
Where are we heading? Are we heading?
That's a valid question. Where are we headed? But, you know, with Australia, allies like Australia now feeling threatened, do you think more US allies could follow suit?
Well, I think with Trump, he does not know whether he was bombing Syria or Iraq when he sent the 65 ballistic missile. I think more allies will fall in line, and the United States have to address, and especially the British and the French should come forward to address the real issue and fighting terrorism collectively.
All right, Dr. WION, pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us this evening and putting your thoughts before us, before our viewers. We're taking a very quick break. When we return, Tata Advanced Systems Limited and US plane maker Lockheed Martin Corp, they signed an agreement to produce F-16 fighters in India ahead of the government's plan to buy more fighter jets. More on that when we return.